How are you feeling today?
I'm good. It's been, after a long weekend, anytime, sometimes it's hard to like shuffle back in. Um,
Hmm.
but I'm feeling really excited about the end of this year, if I'm being honest. I have like just a lot of intentional space for myself. I almost feel motivated to be more productive because I'm being intentional with myself, which feels really good. So,
Oh, that's nice.
yeah,
Maybe you
I
have
showed
more
up
space for
well.
creativity.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. Like I feel like I'm like really giving myself space just to be, which feels like a huge thing for me. So, I'm
Awesome.
giving myself gratitude for how I woke up this morning, certainly. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I've been a little bit sleepy lately. I have a lot going on, including I mentioned this earlier, some homework that is looming over my head. So, yeah,
Yes.
tired, but still motivated to get stuff done.
And tell the people, what are you doing? What are you in school for?
Oh, yeah. I am at LaSalle in their nonprofit leadership program, which is a really flexible online program. I'm really enjoying it. It's giving me language for the experience that I've had in the nonprofit sector over the
Yeah,
last on and off for the last 10 years.
that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
I felt similarly when I did my program, like having, and we'll talk about this when we talk about even coming to Roots of Justice, that like having that language to describe
Hmm.
your experience is really huge, is very
Hmm.
helpful.
It's clutch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So maybe I'm going to put myself on mute and then check in with the audience to see how many people are joining us, and then maybe we can get started.
Okay. That sounds great. And don't forget, y'all, even if you have not sent in questions, you're more than welcome to send us some questions and we'll do our best to answer them.
Yeah.
Hi,
Looks like
Tanya.
I was gonna say it looks like we have a few people here.
Okay.
Maybe we can jump right in.
Yeah. Happy to do so. So welcome everyone. We are Roots of Justice's new co-directors and are extremely excited to be working together. So I guess we could just hop in with like how we encountered Roots of Justice, because this is one of my favorite things about being here with you is it just feels like such a full circle moment
Yeah.
uh, for the both of us because we met through Roots of Justice back in
Hmm.
2019. Yeah. So
Your
how did
name in my phone still says Courtney from the Black Caucus.
you
Like it hasn't been 4 years, and I know you from mad other stuff now. It's still I have from Black Caucus.
Absolutely. I love that. Honored for that to be my name in your phone.
Very practical.
Yes, absolutely. Got to know who the people are. So yeah, how did you first encounter Roots of Justice?
Yeah, so
Brought
I
you
had the
in.
pleasure of first hearing about Roots of Justice. The church that I was attending and the work that I was doing within that church, Roots of Justice would come up in conversation.
Mm,
But a Black woman who had been attending my church, who formerly attended my church, connected me with Corinthia, who has been a trainer for Roots of Justice for 20 some years now.
mm.
I think
Yeah.
about 20 years. And I instantly connected with Corinthia. We had similar experiences with the same church. And she emailed me about attending this training. And I kind of was like, I don't know if I need to go to, I'm Black. What I need that training for?
Right.
Right. Which I think a lot of people feel.
Yes.
But she reminded me twice, right? If somebody says something once to me, I'm like, okay, I can get away with it, right? Then
Yeah.
she said something again, and I was like, oh, okay, Corinthia wants me there. I respect Corinthia. I also trust Corinthia. I'll
Hmm.
attend this thing. And I am so glad that I trusted and respected Corinthia enough to attend the training because it really, attending that 3 day analysis training was absolutely incredible for the reason that we mentioned earlier. It gave
Yeah.
me language for my experience, it gave me community with folks like yourself. And it really gave me action steps and strategies for yeah, the work that I was doing at my church to come back empowered. So that's how
Yeah,
I got connected, and that's why I've stayed connected. How
that's
about you?
awesome. I'm like, is Corinthia a matchmaker? Because Corinthia was my into Roots of Justice as well. At the time, I had just moved to the city. I was living originally from California and had moved to the Philly area in 2015, but didn't move into the city until the end of 2018, maybe. Um, Hard to say. And I Corinthia was actually a professor of mine, turned mentor of mine, friend of mine. And I always heard her talk about Roots of Justice and like different Philly
Mhm.
spaces that we were in, organizer space. And same thing, like she reached out, was like, we're doing this training, da 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 da. And I had a similar response, like I've done these trainings and I don't really
Right.
want to do them. I always have like two experiences. Like I'm biracial, and so I at the time was often in places where I felt uncomfortable being in space and had been in spaces of this like choice that didn't feel good in my spirit in the ways that it was
Mhm.
set up, which was not my experience at Roots of Justice.
Mhm.
It very much gave me language to this embodied experience that I have,
Mhm.
being socialized predominantly as a white woman, but being in this fat queer black body and not
Mhm.
necessarily having the language and tools to talk about my experience. So that's how I got connected, and I'm so grateful because it really is a unique experience from so many other what they would probably refer to as similar work, but we
Mhm.
just do it real different. And I'm really appreciative of that. And same thing, I mean, like the community that I've had, I knew a lot of the people and respected a lot of the people at Roots of Justice. But to see when you see people in their element, like there's something
It's
different.
different.
Like
Yeah,
there's
it
really
hits
something
different.
different. Yeah,
Right. And
yeah.
particularly during our analysis training that provides so much historical foundation, that
Hmm.
really gets some of our trainers because we're some nerds. A lot of us are like history
Absolutely.
nerds and theologians. So, talking about the historical frameworks for a lot of racism is and white supremacy is really exciting for us. It is like what we know best. It is our element. And when we
Mhm.
speak that language, it is this like beautiful chorus of like information. It's really exciting to see trainers in action.
It's true. And you witness people like have light bulbs of their own. Like when
Yes.
you get to stand up there and you see somebody understand something or be able to like explain their experience because of something that you said, like it's really, I don't know what the word is. It's like almost it's affirming, I guess is the word that
Mhm.
I want to use of that talent. But yeah, our trainers in the way that conversation is facilitated in ways that people don't want to talk about this. People don't want
Right.
to talk about this. But our trainers facilitate a conversation in the way that people feel comfortable and we really get to just be together. And I love that.
Yeah.
Like that's probably why we were cool from the beginning, is because we were chilling from the get. We were kikiing, talking through the tables, like you would say
Yes.
something, I would say something, and then we go back to the caucus and like release it all to be able to just have moments together. And it was safe, I guess that's the word I'm looking for. It felt really safe to
It
do this
did.
work. Yeah.
Yeah. It felt really safe and it felt really relatable. I think
Mhm.
so often, especially if you're in predominantly white spaces, it can feel like your experience is that of your own, right? Or that you're doing something wrong to cause some of the hecticness or chaos that may
Yep.
occur. And the caucus space that we facilitate during our analysis training time, just to explain very briefly, if anybody's on who hasn't attended one of our analysis trainings, to give you a little bit of background, Roots of Justice provides a 3-day analysis training that is really, really instrumental in understanding the roots of racism, how race was formed, how it has been indoctrinated in both white folks as well as people of color, right? BIPOC, we don't need white people around for white supremacy to be around, right? We talk about that on day 2. And then day 3, we give you some action steps for analyzing your own organization and where your organization stands on a continuum of anti-racism, and the steps to move forward in a more anti-racist direction. So that is Roots of Justice's analysis training. We also provide, I think some of my sorors are on, and I was like, oh, let me tell my sorors what Roots of Justice
Because
is.
I'm over here like, come on, you better tell our story.
Yeah. I just realized that. We also provide other trainings. We're currently in the midst of redesigning our retreat weekend, our BIPOC retreat weekend, that really helps us dig in together as people of color, whether you are a Black woman or an Asian person. We are all of these different experiences, all of these different not white experiences, right? We're taking the opportunity to come together and to strategize how to heal and also affect change, right? So those are just 2 of our trainings that we provide. And we also do some consulting work. So during our analysis training time, we have a People of Color Caucus time. And it's a kiki.
It is.
It's a kiki. That's the first way I would describe it.
Yeah.
And then it's also a time for healing and building with one another. So that's what we're referencing here.
It's definitely a release. Like I watch whether it's virtual or in person, like I watch our trainers release into that caucus space a little bit, and I watch participants release, because there really is something about having to talk about racism and your own experiences that, like, obviously it's in our bodies too, right? Which is what we talk about. We talk about it being in our bodies and the ways that we're experiencing. And so to see a moment of like
that relief,
and then let's just talk. I think for me, when we talk about like what keeps you here, that's a huge part of what keeps me here, is exactly as we're talking about what we do at Roots of Justice. Like, I love the fact that we very distinctly talk about internalized white supremacy and internalized racial oppression. Because regardless of how you were socialized in this world, if you have spent any part of your life in the US in particular, and like that is our context, right? Like, we can talk about racism throughout the entire globe, but our context here in the US is, and we experience that even in the caucus, of folks from the global majority saying, I spent most of my life outside of the US context, and I have never experienced these things anywhere but here, and this is what it is. And to be able to process through how we have internalized racism in ways that we wouldn't even connect, the way that we talk to each other, the way that we a huge part of what we do too is like, we need each other. Like, the reality of the US is that like there are lots of us with varying identities, and not one of us is the same, and not one of our racial groups is a monolith, even though that's the way that white supremacy set it up for us to talk about race, is for it to be in these groups and for you to kind of stay. But we need one another to actually do this work and to live into an anti-racist society. And so I love that we do our work together, and that white people are included into that space. And then I love that we take a moment to actually talk about our shit too.
Yep. Because there's something special and really powerful about being able to have the conversation amongst yourself, right? We so often, even in subconscious ways, begin to code switch or begin to put on a mask when white people are around. Or there are certain things that you don't want to be weaponized against you, especially if you're coming to a training with colleagues or folks that you attend church with, and you're a person of color. There are certain nuances that really can't be discussed across identities, right? With it needs to be only discussed with the global majority so that we can build power amongst each other. And it's really powerful being able to release in that way, and to be able to show up fully as yourself, and to have people start shaking their heads and saying yes and identifying with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like, what we do is we also give white people space to name their own shit, of the
Mhm.
way that it's been internalized for them as well, and Christians in particular, because
Yes.
we we offer both faith-based and non-faith-based trainings, and those that in particularly for those in Abrahamic traditions, but our own history at Roots of Justice is rooted in the Anabaptist Mennonite tradition. And so
Mhm.
we're able to provide context, and I think that that supports people's understanding coming from a Christian context, to say
Mhm.
the church has implications in this too, and I am a part of this church. So how do
Yep.
we do this all? Like, how do we actually hold it all? And for me, my whole life, I have felt like I've needed to hold a lot of things at one time, and a
Mhm.
lot of truths, and other people's truths too. And for me, what was a blessing in Roots of Justice was that there was space for white people to do what they needed to do without it being on my shoulders and in my way,
Mhm.
and me having to humanize my experience, but that folks had an opportunity also, while we doing what we do and we releasing. I know that it is not their experience. They do not go into caucus space with the same relief that we do, because they have
Mhm.
some
It's
things
a
that
real
they need to
challenge.
talk about. It's a real challenge. And I think that our white trainers too, like, hold that space really beautiful
Yes.
for white folks as well, to be able to discuss what they need to discuss and say what they need to say without it harming us. And I love that. I love that our white trainers will step in if something is being said and protect not only the facilitators, but the folks from the global majority that are in the room, to say,
Mhm.
actually, this is not yours to hold, and it's not yours to even have to hear. We're going to talk about that later. And I
Right.
just think that that protection allows for this to be a safe space for all of us. And
Yes. Yeah. It's a really beautiful structure.
mhm, absolutely. Well, I think we talked about this a little bit, but is there anything that you would add to how your experience with Roots of Justice has been transformational?
Is there anything? I also really appreciate the intergenerational aspect of the work that we're
Yeah.
doing, right? Like there are trainers in their 20s, and there are trainers in their 60s and maybe 70s, right?
Mhm.
And it is so beautiful and it is so impactful to work together from a perspective that has moved through multiple generations, and the power of new perspective, new ideas, bringing social media into the mix. The mix of all of that brilliance together is like
Yeah.
beautiful. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And it's really one of the only spaces that I've ever been in. I would say my sorority to some extent.
Mhm.
But really to have so many different people of so many different ages, this is one of the only spaces where I've experienced that in the
Yeah.
collaboration.
Hmm. Yeah, I would definitely say that that's something similar for me. Have been a like young leader for most of my life and find myself in like leadership positions at a pretty young age. I think that you have similar experiences in that as well. And
Mm-hmm.
there's something about the part of me that has a bachelor's in youth ministry is like, there's a Bible verse about this, but I'm not going to do that. Um but there we hear a lot about like speaking down upon like young people. And that's just like a reality of the space, is feeling like you have to like
Right.
earn the right to respect and prove yourself and like do the fight. And there's some truth to that, right? Like, know your place a little bit.
Right.
You and I've never been at Roots of Justice and not felt loved, cared for, trusted, respected as a
Yes.
colleague, as a peer. And I've never felt like my age was an issue to be fully myself in the space. And in fact, I think that it has been like reason for folks to almost bring me in more, is that they
Mm-hmm.
like exactly what you said. Like, there's like some tangible things of just like being a millennial that like I'm able to be like millennialing. That like might
TikToking.
yeah, absolutely, that like might piss some folks off in other spaces, but folks here are inviting it in. And I think I say that also to say, like, while there's an invitation, what I love about Roots of Justice, and often what I will share in conversations with people externally, is that this is a collective of humans that have been doing this very human-centered work and just humaning in front of each other for decades of time. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like they're really, this is, no one is going to sugarcoat anything, like
Right.
not at all. And this isn't like a workspace. This is a
Right.
collective of people who believe in doing anti-racism work, and are here out of a passion, not out of an obligation or like a means to necessarily pay bills, but because this is
Right.
information that we want to be accessible to the people, which completely changes the dynamics of how you interact with folks because you're choosing to be there. And
Mm-hmm.
it's more like it's your chosen family, you know, like it's, we go through the things together, and sometimes we disagree, most of the time we disagree, you know, if we're being honest, but the ways that we show up to each other, like that's the part to have, for me, like collective intergenerational love that meets all of us where we are, like
Mm-hmm.
that's really precious. And I did, you know, my people, my friends that are on here know I did my like eat, pray, love, and you know that I did my little eat, pray, love for 3 months that I was on the road. And one of the places that I was in was in Atlanta, which Tulani lives in Atlanta. And that's something else that's really special to me about Roots of Justice, is that we hit almost every region
Yeah.
in Turtle Island, you know, like we are everywhere. So while I was doing my trip, like I was intentional about passing out flyers, but I had 2 weeks that I was in Atlanta. And so I got to spend time, like I was in Tulani's backyard, you know, just
That's
talking and
beautiful.
having a beer with Tulani, like doing exactly this, and dreaming with him about what that looks like for us to be this intergenerational collective where we get to
Mm-hmm.
learn so much from each other. And I didn't exactly answer this earlier, but like what keeps me here is that we learn from each other and we make
Mm-hmm.
that learning and that education accessible to folks, because those of us who need this most, and I'm not talking about what, like I'm talking about like us
Us.
BIPOC folks who need the tangible, clear-cut information, we're able to provide that accessibility. Like education is really powerful and it's not accessible
Yes.
to a lot of us, and schools are not teaching this. You know, we talk about
No.
progressives like this is the real American educators right here. You know, like we're telling the truth, we're truth tellers and we're storytellers. And I think that you know, combined with having like oral traditions for a lot of BIPOC folks, like that's like a really beautiful niche part of what we do, is we just talk truthfully with
Yes.
one another and learn from one another and then share our learnings.
Yeah. Something that has really stuck with me is something that Tulani said. And as information became more accessible, right? We have Google, we have TikTok, we have all of the social media that provides us with information on an everyday basis. That's when you started seeing all of these laws come into effect, trying to restrict the type of education that you get in school. And if you
Yes.
tell people that what you're hearing on TikTok and everything else ain't true, that's why we're not teaching it in school, well, then you're going to start questioning it wherever you hear it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is a very distinct step that's being made to restrict education in schools, because
Yep.
people who are informed are people who are empowered, right?
Period. Talk about it.
That's the power of Roots of Justice, right? We provide that extra content, right? You see it, right? You see segregation, you see the way that men and women interact with each other, and our ideas of gender, right? You see that every day in the world, but you might not have the language, and that may normalize it for you. Roots of Justice and the work that we do provides that nuance and that language to understand what you're seeing and to choose otherwise.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's exactly right. And I'm so grateful to be a part of folks that want to do continued education in that way, which I think honestly is a little bit of like why we uh prioritize the co-director leadership model when we
Mm-hmm.
did, was wanting to prioritize continued education, wanting to prioritize ways that we could develop ourselves, while we are developing our community and educating our community as well. So maybe we could take a minute to talk about that, of like, what do we do at Roots of Justice?
Yeah, absolutely. You want me to jump in first?
Sure.
Cool. So I wrote some notes down so I don't forget anything. So if y'all see me looking to the right, I'm looking at my notes. But one of the first things that I do, so my role is the director of curriculum and marketing. So essentially, what I do is I look at our curriculum. I help us update our curriculum. I'm currently working on that. We have really fantastic curriculum, but we've been doing this for 25 years now. So there's always going to be updates needed. So I take a look at our curriculum and provide updates. I stay informed with the trainers and support them as they're updating their curriculums and also envisioning and designing curriculums that can empower all of you. And then I also expand our social media reach, right? So I am up when I can't sleep at night sometimes, and I'm on our Instagram page liking other pages and making comments, because there are so many amazing organizations out there that are doing similar work of peacemaking, of providing education, of working towards anti-racism. And I like to engage and get to know them. So I'm expanding our social media reach in those ways, as well as designing some strategy that helps us connect with folks that may want our trainings and to get more information from us. And I also have a vision of us being an educational, informational resource in general with our trainings as well as our social media presence. So
Yeah,
that's me.
absolutely. I'm so
Little
excited to
emoji.
hear. I love it. I love it. I'm so excited you're here. I mean, I have said it 1,000 times, but to have your partnership in this in particular has been, yeah, I'm already so enlightening. Like, to learn from you directly, like it's just such an honor and privilege to be able to do it. And I think that we make a real powerhouse team. And so
You
I'm
do
just
too.
so excited to be doing this and to have our focus areas so that we can see some growth and sustainability in those ways, and to be collaborative. There, we, like we said, like, we are a collective of people. We've always done this together, and so I really am so appreciative of the opportunity to do this alongside you. I was talking to an executive director that through my time at Roots of Justice, I've stayed connected to, and telling them that, you know, we had just done this model, and they were just like, this is the dream. I'm like, I know.
Right.
I know this is the dream, to not do this alone. It's just really
Right.
so
Because it's hard
beautiful. It is. It's
and it's
hard.
not sustainable.
It's not. It's not. And we've seen that even here at Roots of Justice, it not be sustainable for one
Mhm.
person to be in this place. But we have seen sustainability and co-leadership in our history as well. And so I'm really excited to return to that model. But anyways, I now serve as the director of operations and development. I often talk about my work as being the behind the scenes person. Like, I don't particularly like to be in front of the camera. I've been like serving in leadership at Roots of Justice for over 2 years, and this is the first time that someone's gotten me on a live. And I've been asked before, so I think that, you know, that speaks a little bit to how I appreciate you, and I'm glad to do this alongside you. But I really do see myself as the behind the scenes person. I see my role as a place where I can support in making like the trainings as seamless as possible. Like, I want trainers to just have to show up. Like, I don't want it to be really much of anything else. I'm trying to think about it all before you get there, so that when you get there and you're like, where's this thing? Like, it's there and you have the tools and the resources that you need, and it's taken care of. So that's a lot of my role. A lot of my role is just making sure that we're operating effortlessly and seamlessly. But another part of my role that I really value, is just giving the trainers their flowers. And we've spoken about this a lot. We started off as Damascus Road about 12 years ago. Now we transitioned into Roots of Justice, but the core group of who we still are people who have been doing this work for decades together, from the early 90s, using language that had not been used yet, saying the words anti-racist, which like was taboo at the time.
Right.
Um, And so I really strongly believe in giving people their flowers while they're here. And so I'm like, I'm gonna give y'all your flowers because you've been doing the damn thing for a long time. So a huge part of my role is just also being able to advocate for roots of justice in other spaces, to share about who we are. We're a small but mighty team, and I want people to know when they hear roots of justice to actually experience and feel the power that we are and who we are and what we have done together, and to understand our collective. And so I do a lot of talking with potential people that we might partner with or collaborate with, and schedule our trainings and this, that, and the other, and send 100 emails. That's me. I send emails.
I also think you have this really unique talent of being able to identify people's gifts and match them with appropriate trainings,
Mm,
as well as just encouraging people. So I think of me coming into this role, I actually wanted to be in this role when it was first offered.
yeah.
And I think we had a co-director model that we were trying to do when we first started advertising for it. And I
Yeah.
really felt a lot of doubt in myself. And it wasn't until this summer that I finally was like, no, I really feel supported by Courtney. I really feel like she sees me. Let me ask her if she would want to do this with me. And then we just went full steam ahead. So
Yeah.
I just think you are really fantastic at identifying people's gifts and their talents and the best in them and really magnifying that. And that also feels like love. So I think you're really good at loving us as trainers as well.
Thank you. I received that. That was really beautiful and kind. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm like trying to see some of these comments too. This is too hard to look at comments, but I see that y'all are saying things and I can't wait to actually look.
Oh, there's like 17 comments.
Yes.
Maybe Jen can drop it in the chat at some point for us. Um,
Yeah, Jen, you don't have to come off camera if you don't want to, but we can certainly shout you out. Jen is the third person on our staff team, who does our grants and fundraising and pretty much all things support as well in the background, and is our tech tonight. But Jen has been a backbone, especially for me over these last couple of years, and I'm so grateful.
we have two questions that
Okay.
came in. What are you both most excited about with this new co-director model? So you were formerly the only director, the executive director. So I'm interested in your response to that first, because you're
Yeah.
actually seeing the shift in the role.
Yeah. I mean, honestly and truly, the thing that I'm most excited about is just collaboration. Um, and you are this way too, at least in my experience, but I'm a talker. Like I'm gonna sit here and talk. I'm a Gemini, I'm gonna say the things that I need to say. But I want to collaborate about them. Like I have all of these ideas and I want to be able to like flush them out. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that in and of itself, while we have the different areas that we're focused on, like just being able to talk to somebody, talk through something, and to not feel alone, like it's a really big whether
Role.
it's like internalized or external, like it feels like a big weight to represent solely, like whether or not that's how we are in practice. Like a title like executive director has weight to that, of feeling like you're responsible to speak on behalf of, and to feel like I have someone who's like in the weeds with me every day. It just feels so good. I don't believe that we were meant to be in this world by ourselves, and I would rather not hold a title like that. Um, and if I'm being real honest in this space, like I don't really believe in the executive director model, period.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm really excited to be in co-leadership because I don't like the hierarchy that an executive director model just gives
Creates.
in and of itself. And there's a lot of reality to what exists in C3s and like why those things are required. And like somebody got to sign the papers and somebody has to make those decisions. And I get that. But I'm really grateful to be in a collaborative, collective space where that's not the expectation, uh,
Mm-hmm.
is that I'm somehow alone at the top. I don't want to ever be alone at the top. That does not sound
Right.
like a place to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel excited about a few different things. I feel excited about the collaboration. We've already had really fantastic and encouraging and exciting conversations about what we envision next for Roots of Justice. Um, I'm also really excited to be two Black Johns doing it. You know what I'm saying? Like, we are two Black femmes working to change the world. Like, the work that we're doing is powerful, and to do that in collaboration with another Black femme
Yeah,
feels powerful, and it feels like it really turns the world upside down, because oftentimes when you think of an executive, you think of a white man, right? You think of an
absolutely.
older white man in a suit. Look at us.
Yes.
It's not that. Okay. And that's what it is, right? So I'm
Absolutely.
excited about the opportunity to, yeah, just change things, change what we consider normal, to change the narrative and to work together on that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's really, thank you for saying that too. And like also bringing me back into that space, because that's a dream come true. Like, what do you
Right.
mean? And we were almost, and it's crazy when we talk about like internalized racism and things as well, like even in our groups, we had a moment where we were like, is this even going to be a thing? Because our co-director models in the past were white and Black together. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of how our spaces have been. And we've been so supported too, as like two Black femmes to just do the damn thing.
Yep.
And there's no one else in all of our many identities and all of the things that I know that like I would want to do this with, for real, for real.
Right.
And I'm
Right.
just so grateful. Yeah.
Right. Because in my experience, Black women are, I don't know, just some of the most amazing teachers
Yeah.
and people to be mentored by, right? So in this, we are just, it's like iron sharpening iron, right? Like when you were talking about learning from me, I'm sitting here like, that's crazy because I am learning from you. Like that's what I'm expecting from you. So yeah, it's a dream.
Yeah. It really is. I love that we can get like giddy about it too, because we're both still like so excited, and I hope that continues, because I'm excited for not just our sustainability, because that's a reality and needed, but like our growth, like having this opportunity to develop our curriculum for people to know us. Like those are things like in our dreams that we've just been doing the work for so long. But like I'm gonna think big, like the world deserves to actually have this offering. Like this is an
Yeah,
offering to the world. You know what
right.
exists here. And we would be wrong to hold that for ourselves. Like
Mm-hmm.
people deserve to have this community, to have this collective also. Like that's the beginnings. And I think that for the co-director model, for me too, what comes back into the original intent of Roots of Justice was to be a space for anti-racism organizers and activists to have a moment to
Yes.
come back together. While you're out in the streets and you're doing all of this other stuff, you can come in together and have a safe place and community. And we get to have that now too in
Mm-hmm.
our particular line of organizing, because we don't always talk about the, when you do organizing work or you do anti-racism, you're often thinking about the training, the facilitation, or like what's happening on the ground. There's not often like partnership in the like behind the scenes type of work. But damn it, that's organizing too. And we doing the
Yeah.
damn thing, you
This
know?
is
And
community
so
organizing.
absolutely it is.
Yeah,
Um, and so to do that with you feels really exciting, and for that to be part of our co-director model. Yeah.
definitely. I'm excited about one of the questions that we thought of earlier. How would
Mhm.
you imagine a world that centers equity and belonging? What would that look like to you?
Yeah. I love this question because if I'm being honest, I don't think that I'll see it in my lifetime. But
Mhm.
it's something that I am really proud to be a part of getting to that future. And I do believe that it will happen. But you know, we are a peacemaking organization. We believe in peace. And I envision a place where like we are not being put into boxes first and
Mhm.
foremost, that we can live into our truth, and that there are restorative practices as a part of the ways that we agree, disagree, are in conflict, in the ways that we receive each other. I believe that Roots of Justice is an example of what community could be, the ways that
Yeah.
you can call people in, how you can hold people. Um, and that it doesn't have to have this detrimental, violent response to it. Humans are going to human. This is really paralleled, but I did this before too. But I'm watching Game of Thrones right now, and there's like not much more violent than like Game of Thrones in the ways that conflict is dealt with. And that's the exact opposite of what I think that we want to create, cultivate, and how we want to exist. And every time something is happening in this show that we of course know, like medieval times are very real, very real. All this is very real. And I have been watching and like analyzing the ways that people still respond to conflict in these extremely violent ways. And I envision a space where we can just have a conversation. Like, to me, that's
Mm-hmm.
like first and foremost, is I think that we actually have a lot more power in our words than we do in our hands. And so that's what it begins. That's where it begins for me. When I talk about equity and belonging, it means that my voice matters. It means that I get to speak up to my experience. It means that I get to hear somebody else speak theirs. And it means that we get to come to some sort of resolve together in relationship that is restorative and sustaining. And it means that community gets to do what community does, which comes alongside one another. And I have this shirt, there's a quote from Brian Stevenson where he talks about none of us is the worst thing that we've ever done.
Yeah.
And like that, to me, to talk about equity and belonging means that that is embodied in each of us,
Yes.
that we don't see somebody and think about the worst thing that they've ever done, but we see the human being that is in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's not to say that any of us are perfect or that there's not going to be conflict. I believe that that's true. But I believe that there's a way that we can live our life in harmony and without it being like flowers and rainbows and feeling like, we need to be in this space. Like, I think that conflict can still exist while we actually just hold community sustainably and beautifully. So that's my dream for equity and belonging. I think that it starts with conversation. I think that it starts with trust. I think it starts with community. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
we have to start our own things. Like, I struggle daily being a part of what we talk about at Roots of Justice is we're talking about the system. We're talking about the
Mm-hmm.
systems that exist, which means that we have to create a new system.
Yep.
Like, we have to create our own ways of being, and we can't just wait for some miracles to happen. We have to just live it out. And so
Mm-hmm.
how I show up into my own power and my the ways that I know that I belong, I have to believe that too, so that I can show up in the same ways, because I wasn't socialized in the ways that other folks were. And I don't have generational power and wealth behind me to tell me that I can
Mm-hmm.
say what the hell I want. And that doesn't mean that I need to go left, but it does mean that I can have the power to have a conversation, life-giving, loving conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about for you? What comes up?
Yeah. I love what you're mentioning about like belonging starting with community and conversations and growing trust, because that is certainly a foundation of it. And I also think it looks like community being intentional about flipping societal norms upside down to
Yeah.
move towards equity, right? And it may feel uncomfortable initially. It may feel like certain people are being treated unfairly, particularly dominant bodied people, dominant experienced bodied people. But for belonging and equity to happen, there needs to be real challenge. There needs to be real discomfort
Yeah.
and intentional choices for that.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. And that, I really appreciate you naming that discomfort part, because
Yeah,
that's the piece. Like, it is uncomfortable, and that
that's the
even goes,
piece that trip people up every time.
it does. And that's why I said, like, it does not have to be rainbows and butterflies and like all this. That's not realistic. No one is saying
It's
that.
not.
It is going to be very uncomfortable. And that's the invitation even into our trainings too. Like, be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Let's
Mhm.
do something different. Let's build it together.
Because learning something new or having a new experience is very rarely comfortable. You know what I mean? Like the first time you rode a bike, you thought your dad was going to let you die. That's like that's the experience for everybody. You don't
Yeah.
trust that parent, grandparent whomever, I don't trust you. You're going to let me fall. You go, and then you're all right. But
Right.
you were uncomfortable initially, right? So any experience that I've ever had where I had to learn something new, where I had to try something new, where I had to experience something that was outside of what I expected, it was uncomfortable, but
Yeah.
you grow from that,
Yeah.
right? Like it is an opportunity every time you feel uncomfortable with something that you've heard that challenges you. Every time you experience a moment where you say, oh, I've never considered that before, I've never heard that before, what does that mean? That is an opportunity for you to lean into that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it gives us space for abundance as well when when we can learn from each other and also not feel that we are pigeonholed into a particular way that we have to be. Like I think that goes into belonging too, as when I think about even some of the ways that we're talking about like learning, instinctively I think about academia and education
Mm-hmm.
in that way, because it's so much of like where we learn. You learn in the home and you learn at school. That's like a huge part of it until you become an adult and you in all these other spaces and you learn and you have almost your learning in your own hands. But while you were talking, I was thinking about like getting it, like I was not good at math growing up at all. Still, me and math, we not the ones. I do finances for a lot of organizations. I got to check my numbers. It's not where I want to be. Um, but there's like just like we talked about in the trainings, there's this moment of like I got it when you do get it, but there's also a lot of moments that you're like, this is not for me. What
Mm-hmm.
is for me? And to me, like that piece of not just belonging but equity means that there's an opportunity for everybody to find what is for them and
Mm-hmm.
to give to community and society within that role without it being like you're supposed to do this or you're supposed to do that or this is the way that you have to go, but that we actually get to just live our life and like be able to give our gifts. One of the most beautiful questions I've ever had is like, what is your gift? What is your medicine to this world? And I'm like, whoa, what is my medicine? Like, what am I
That's
giving out?
interesting.
It's like such a deep question. It's been something that's been really, I have answers to it, but I don't know that they're complete by any means,
Mm-hmm.
or, and so anyways, I say all to say, like, I think each of us has medicine to give to this world. And for us to belong in an equitable way means each of us to embody what our medicine is too.
Yeah. I love that phrase, what's your medicine? Because medicine is supposed to like support an ailment, to fix an ailment, right? So there are things that ail the world, and we have a medicine, we have an aid for that. We all have this intrinsic aid. That's
Yeah.
interesting. I got to think of that more.
Mm-hmm.
We got some more questions from the audience. I feel like Mati's question is simple. So, when is Roots of Justice coming back to Philly? We actually have a kind of answer to that. We're hoping to have a training solidified for early next year.
Yeah, we have well we should be holding hopefully a couple of trainings coming to Philly next year. We have two in the talks right now, at least into the Philly area. But I feel like Mati wants us to be like in Philly. Is that what you say, Mati? Because I'm like, we have a lot of trainers in Philly, and really all it takes sometimes is to say that someone is willing to host it. So if you are on this call and you're in Philly and you want to host
Yes.
training with us, let us know. That's all we need to
Yep.
start it. We'll run. Yeah. Do we want to answer this one as well? It looks like we have a question. What looks the most like success to you due to the Roots of Justice work within the Christian community in the past 2 years?
What looks the most like success to you? What do you think this question means?
I think what comes up for me in this, what comes up for me is that a lot of people stop at our analysis training, and that's
Mm-hmm.
really, it's not our intention for people to stop at an analysis training. We have an organizing training, and then we have retreats that follow, both Set Free with Bethany. You talked about that a little bit earlier, which is where we go a little bit more in depth into internalized racial oppression, and Fire and Clay, which goes a little bit more in depth for internalized racial superiority, in a retreat setting with folks. But our organizing training and educating training is really giving tools and resources for groups to do that work in their particular areas, which you talked about, like coming back to your church at the time and being able to like really organize into that particular space. And so success for me looks like you don't stop at the foundation of understanding. Like that foundation of understanding is incredibly important. Being able to hold the truth that the church is complicit in
Yeah.
racist systems and continues to uphold them. And then you begin to do the work within accountability and community, and you don't stop with that understanding. Like that's a good beginning, and it's a really important beginning, but it does have to continue. And I find that a lot of churches, a lot of white churches in particular, try to skip a step. They go straight to just wanting to fix all of the things, and they don't sit with the weight of that understanding and that foundation together before going into those steps. And so that's the success for me, is it looks like ongoing. It looks like sustainability. It looks like what we're talking about, which is sustainability. That's what it looks like to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is a hard question for me to answer, because to come up with like
Yeah.
concrete what a success is, always things like that, finite things like that are hard for me to define. But I think success for me looks like organizations providing spaces for the people of color in their organizations to be empowered and to have
Yeah.
power. That's something that's emphasized in our organizing training. And I've seen some organizations that we've worked with then implement like BIPOC leadership groups that
Yeah.
have power to make decisions. Um, yeah, I think that's one of the most successful things I've seen.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll take this one last question from Tanya. How does someone become a trainer with Roots of Justice? We actually have on our Flipcast, and maybe Jen, if you wouldn't mind, we do have an application open. We do it cohort style. So as we receive applications of interest, we first ask that somebody takes our training. We want you to believe in what it is that you're asking to be a part of and to experience us before you yourself are a trainer. So that is a first requirement, is that you would participate in a training. And then after that, we have an application process, like I said, and then we do a cohort style where folks can come in, and we basically teach our lesson plan. Like we teach what we do with one another. There's a syllabus, and then you would come in and you get to meet the trainers, talk about why you want to join us, and then come on in. So it really is, it's a collective effort. Our trainers really run a lot of that process, and we are in the process of making some updates to that cohort as well. But anyone who's interested in the collective would definitely love for you to reach out to us. And Jen, maybe as just like a reminder for folks, you can put our emails in the chat as well. And folks are welcome to email us directly.
Any other questions we want to answer? Do we want to start wrapping it up?
Yeah, I think I want to answer like one of these questions. We got two questions that came in ahead of time. I'm wondering if either of them feels good to you to answer as we wrap up. And then we can talk a little bit about our campaign.
Mm-hmm. I think, how do we center anti-oppression work without centering white supremacy and patriarchal hegemony? I always
Yeah.
struggle with that word. I went full throttle though.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that one. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, this is like going all the way back to like why I'm still here. This is why I'm still here, is that we don't do this. Like we don't
Mm-hmm.
center this learning. And I think what you just said is a huge part of that too, is where are the BIPOC voices in your group? And has there been an opportunity for them to speak up for themselves? That's something that we've started to even implement as we reach out to people, or people reach out to us. We ask those direct questions, especially for places that are being led by white folks, and in particular white men. We want to hear from somebody else. Tell me about your experience. So I think that that's a huge part of how we decenter. Other ways is just the ways that we show up in our trainings. We're always going to have 3 facilitators in our trainings, and we do our very best to offer a gender and race balance, but it looks like there always being 2 BIPOC folks in the room and 1 white facilitator, which I think, again, we are centering our BIPOC voices and facilitation in that space rather than the white voices that are in the room. And then lastly, I think that we name and give access to, like Kimberly Crenshaw coined, intersectionality, and like all of the spaces where it begins in a Black woman's body and all of the intersections that exist there. And we talk about that a little bit too, of like, what does it look like with all of our varying identities and how we show up. And just simply like to give space, like we gonna have folks that are BIPOC speak first.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna talk first, we're gonna take up space, and we're gonna encourage folks from the global majority to take up space, and we're gonna encourage women and folks of all genders to take up space. So I mean, that's something that I appreciate about us, is that I've never felt like I needed to take any less space, which is not common. And what I want to refer to in this moment is like the outside world. But I would love to hear your answer, because I feel like you respond to things like this really well. So what is coming up for you and how we do this?
Yeah, I'm feeling frustrated because I started getting a headache in the last 10 minutes. So my
Oh
brain is
no.
not forming responses in the way that I would like. But my first thought is centering the experiences of people of color, of Black, Indigenous people of color, right? Um, we know the experiences in our body. We know what needs to be healed. We also have so many practices that we have been taught are tools of the devil, right? We've been told they're demonic, right? But there are so many ancient practices that our ancestors knew were healing for us and connected us to the divine, and getting reconnected to those practices and really tapping into those ancestral healing practices, and really, yes, speaking from our experiences, I think that's how we decenter white supremacy in this work.
Yes, well said. I'm so sorry that you have a little bit of a headache right now. That
I'm
is
so annoyed.
that's terrible. That's
I'm like,
terrible.
oh, I'm so dull because my head hurts. But typically I have more energy than this.
You were bringing a ton of energy, and I'm grateful that you were here. And so
And I
maybe
just teetered out.
that's okay. I want you to lay down.
I
This is
want to lay
also our
down.
thing, is like holding each other accountable to go lay down. If people knew how much we did outside of Roots of Justice as well, each of us. So I would love for you to lay down.
I
You've
got
been
to make my mom a baked potato first.
did turn that oven on real quick.
Yes.
Get her done. Well, thank you, Bethany, for being here, not just, tonight, but at Roots of Justice as a trainer. I'm so glad that you said yes to Corinthia. I'm glad that I said yes to Corinthia. I'm glad that you said yes to coming into this capacity as a trainer. And just to be my friend too. Like, it's so joyful to be doing this space with a friend. And so, yeah, I'm really grateful for that. And wanting to encourage folks that are in this space to please give to our sustainability fund. We want to continue to do this. We want to continue to be in co-leadership. We want to continue to be the badass Black women that we are, and to be able to be in space where we get to lead in these particular ways and to cultivate community and care, and really sustain the ways that we are seeking to do this. And so please choose to give to us. Our goal is for $10,000 by the end of the year, to give towards us having another year of this model. So thanks, y'all. And please do not be strangers, and come book a training with Roots of Justice.
Absolutely. Yes.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much
Bye,
for being
y'all.
here tonight. This was fun. Peace.